In the shadowed corridors of power, a nation lay defeated and humiliated. Germany, once a titan, had been brought to its knees by the merciless jaws of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, that cruel vice, squeezed the lifeblood from its military might. It restricted German armaments to a maximum of 100,000 troops. No conscription, no tanks, no armored cars, no military aircraft, and no submarines. On top of that, it had to surrender most of its territory and pay war reparations of $6.6 billion to the Allies. Stripped of territory, resources, and pride, Germany's glory had crumbled like ancient ruins. Yet, in the heart of this desolation, a man with a twisted vision emerged, a man named Adolf Hitler. His eyes blazed with ambition, fueled by a hunger for vengeance and a thirst for Lebensraum, the living space that would restore Germany's strength. And so, against all odds, he ignited the flames of World War II. But how? How did Hitler defy the shackles of defeat? The answer lay not in his own cunning, but in the steel-clad brilliance of his generals. General Erich von Manstein, Erwin Rommel, Heinz Guderian, Albert Kesselring, Gerd von Rundstedt, Fedor von Bock, Admiral Karl Dönitz, Hermann Göring, and many more men. The best German generals, these architects of destiny, had set the wheels of World War II in motion. These men, like chess masters on a blood-soaked board, plotted and strategized. The world would never be the same. Imagine a storm, unstoppable. This was Blitzkrieg, Germany's revolutionary warfare strategy during World War II. It changed the face of battle forever. But what was it exactly? Who developed it? How did it come to be? Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war, was born out of necessity. After World War I, Germany was in ruins. The Treaty of Versailles had crippled his military. However, German military thinkers were not defeated. They needed a new way to fight, a way to avoid deadly stalemates of trench warfare, the biggest hurdle of World War I. Several minds contributed to the Blitzkrieg. One early advocate and key pioneer was General Heinz Guderian. He was crucial in developing the concept of Panzer Division. His 3rd Motor Transport Battalion became the blueprint for the future German armored force. One day, Guderian reached out to the regime. He demonstrated the concept of Panzer to Hitler himself. Swelled with confidence, he then wrote Achtung Panzer, a marvelous book on using mechanized force in war. The book tackled critical questions that were not answered by anyone before. How will the army get fuel, spares, and replacement vehicles? And how can large mechanized forces move efficiently? Guderian solved these jigsaw puzzles by finding some missing pieces. These pieces of the puzzle were refueling, spare parts, and access to roads. Guderian was a visionary. He believed in speed and mobility. He studied the works of earlier military theorists like Karl von Clausewitz. Clausewitz emphasized the importance of concentrating the Schwerpunkt, the center of gravity, where it was most dense, identifying it as the effective target for attack. According to Clausewitz, the more forces we can concentrate in our Schwerpunkt, center of gravity, the more certain and massive the effect will be. He also said, 2 basic principles underlie all strategic planning. The first principle is to act with the utmost concentration. The second principle is to act with the utmost speed. Taking inspiration from Clausewitz's works, Guderian came up with a radical idea. He proposed using tanks called panzers, aircraft, dive bombers, motorized artillery, and infantry in a coordinated assault. Panzers would break through enemy lines. They would establish the Kessel that trapped and immobilized enemy forces. Aircraft would bomb and strafe. Infantry would follow, securing gains. All these combined forces would be effectively linked with radio communications. This tactic would disrupt the main enemy battle position at the Schwerpunkt. The use of swift mobility, shock and awe, and locally concentrated firepower in a skillfully coordinated attack paralyzed an adversary's capacity to organize defenses. They could then exploit that paralysis by penetrating the adversary's rear areas and disrupting its whole system of communications and administration. Germany's success at the beginning of World War II hinged largely on the Blitzkrieg method. Speed was crucial. Coordination was essential. This was a departure from traditional slow-moving warfare. It also highlighted the role of technology in modern warfare. Panzers and aircraft became central to military strategy. Now was the time to test the blitzkrieg. September 1st, 1939. At 4:45 a.m., the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish fortress at Westerplatte. The sky lit up with explosions. The invasion of Poland had begun. Adolf Hitler had rattled his saber at Poland for months. He said ethnic Germans were persecuted inside Poland. It was Nazi propaganda to invade Poland. Hitler proclaimed, "The Polish state has refused the peaceful settlement of relations which I desired, and has appealed to arms. To put an end to this lunacy, I have no other choice than to meet force with force from now on." Germany's strategy was blitzkrieg. It was swift, brutal, and effective. The aim was to overwhelm the enemy with speed and firepower. The Polish forces were caught off guard. They were no match for the German war machine. Several key generals orchestrated this invasion. Gerd von Rundstedt led Army Group South. Fedor von Bock commanded Army Group North. Both were seasoned military leaders. Their tactics were precise and ruthless. There were 62 divisions, with more than 1,300 airplanes in support. The invasion began with a coordinated assault. Wehrmacht attacked from 3 directions: north, south, and west. Von Bock's Army Group North advanced from East Prussia and Pomerania. They aimed to capture the Polish corridor and link up with forces in the west. The Polish forces crumbled under the relentless assault. The Germans moved swiftly, capturing key cities. Von Rundstedt's Army Group South attacked from Silesia and Slovakia. Their objective was to encircle and destroy the main Polish forces. The Germans used pincer movements to trap Polish troops. The Polish army was outflanked and overwhelmed. The Luftwaffe achieved air superiority within days. It bombed Polish airfields, railways, and cities. It destroyed the Polish Air Force. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, bombed Polish airfields, railways, and cities. It destroyed the Polish Air Force. Bombers targeted military installations and infrastructure. Fighters strafed columns of Polish troops and civilians. The skies were filled with roars of engines and the sounds of explosions. Panzers and infantry followed, crushing any resistance. German warships and U-boats attacked the Polish Navy. The Baltic Sea became a battleground. The Polish Navy was small and outdated. It stood little chance against the modern German fleet. By mid-September, German forces had encircled Warsaw. The Polish capital was under siege. Artillery pounded the city day and night. Polish resistance was heroic but hopeless. They had no motorized divisions. They tried to stop advancing German tanks by massed cavalry charges. Britain and France did little to help their ally. The Polish campaign lasted just over a month. On September 27th, Warsaw surrendered. Before the invasion began, Hitler's general staff was a little skeptical. It feared that the assault was premature because the Wehrmacht was still not at full strength. The invasion was thus a highly calculated risk. Thanks to von Bock and von Rundstedt, Germany was victorious in this invasion. Inside the dimly lit war room in Berlin, the air smelled of victory. Maps sprawled across Hitler's table, and generals of Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, Armed Forces High Command, huddled around. They leaned in, their eyes reflecting the weight of the moment. Poland lay conquered. Germany's eastern border is now a fortress. Hitler's gaze shifted westward, his pointer tracing the map's edges. Now Hitler moved his stick towards the west. He crossed out Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, and then France, one after another. The generals exchanged glances, their hearts swelling. They smiled and cherished. In that room, courage flowed like molten lava. Victory was no longer a distant dream, it was etched on the map. April 9th, 1940. Germany launched a surprise attack on Denmark and Norway. This was Operation Weserübung. The goal? Secure strategic positions and control vital resources. The Blitzkrieg was in full swing. Germany's strategy was clear. Swift, decisive action. Denmark and Norway were crucial for controlling the North Sea and securing iron ore from Sweden. The plan was to strike hard and fast, leaving no room for resistance. General Leonard Kaupisch commanded the invasion of Denmark. General Nicholas von Falkenhorst oversaw the assault on Norway. The invasion began at dawn. German forces moved with precision. Paratroopers, naval forces, and ground troops coordinated their attack. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. At 4:15 a.m., the Wehrmacht crossed the border with Denmark. The attack was swift and brutal. Paratroopers landed at key airfields. The Danish military was not expecting the attack. Within hours, Copenhagen was surrounded. General Kaupisch's forces moved with lightning speed. The Danish government, ill-prepared, surrendered at 6 a.m. The entire operation took less than 6 hours. Denmark was now under German control. April 9th. The Nazis attacked Norway. German troops landed in Oslo, Kristiansand, Stavanger, Bergen, and Trondheim. Norway was a different challenge. The terrain was rugged, the weather was harsh, but the Germans were prepared. General von Falkenhorst led the charge. The invasion fleet set sail, carrying troops and equipment. The German Navy played a crucial role. Warships and submarines targeted Norwegian coastal defenses. The battleship Bluha led the assault on Oslo, but the Norwegians were ready. Coastal batteries at Oscarsborg Fortress opened fire. Blucher was hit and sank, but the Germans pressed on. Paratroopers landed at key locations. They seized airfields and strategic points. The Luftwaffe provided air support, bombing Norwegian positions. The heavens echoed with thunders of engines and detonations. German troops advanced from multiple directions. They aimed to capture major cities and ports. The Norwegians fought bravely, but were overwhelmed and overpowered. The Germans used blitzkrieg tactics, moving swiftly and striking hard. By April 10th, Oslo was under German control. The Norwegian government flew north, hoping to continue the fight, but the Germans were relentless. They pushed forward, capturing city after city. Narvik was a key objective. It was vital for controlling the iron ore supply to fuel the German armaments industry. The battle raged for weeks. German mountain troops, led by General Edvard Dietl, faced fierce resistance. The Allies sent reinforcements, but the Germans held their ground. By June 10th, Norway had fallen. The Germans had achieved their objectives. Denmark and Norway were now under German occupation. The Blitzkrieg had proven its effectiveness once again. The tales of Poland, Denmark, and Norway were just the beginning. The Blitzkrieg rolled on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The world watched in awe and fear as Germany, guided by its able generals, continued its march across Europe. 10th of May. The dawn of a new horror. Dark clouds gathered over Europe again. The world held its breath. Nazi Germany struck. Its target, Netherlands, Belgium, and France. The Blitzkrieg began. The plan, swift and brutal. Known as Foul Gelb, or Case Yellow, a lightning war. Speed and surprise are their weapons. First, the Netherlands. The Dutch were unprepared. German paratroopers landed from the skies. German tanks quickly broke through the thin defenses along the frontiers. The infantry followed. The Luftwaffe bombed Rotterdam. Bombers and parachutists immobilized airfields, bridges, and railroads. Refugees, crowded along the roads, were machine-gunned from the air. Chaos erupted. It was a situation of total dislocation. The Dutch fought back, but it was a losing battle. On May 15th, the Netherlands surrendered. Queen Wilhelmina and the government fled to Britain. The Blitzkrieg rolled on. Next, Belgium. The Nazis unleashed their secret weapon. Paratroopers landed at Fort Epinal, a key fortress. They used gliders to land silently and explosives to breach the defenses. The fortress, thought impregnable, fell in just one day. General Fedor von Bock's Army Group B advanced rapidly. They faced fierce resistance but pressed on. The Belgian army fought valiantly, but it was outmatched. The Allies rushed to help, but it was too late. The Ardennes Forest, a place thought impassable. General Gerd von Rundstedt's army group tries pushing through. Then appears the pariah, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein embarked on his military journey as an officer in 1906. World War I saw him serving on both the Western and Russian fronts. His strategic acumen propelled him upward. By 1936, he held the rank of Major General. His reputation continued to grow. In 1938, he became a Lieutenant General. As World War II erupted, Manstein served as Chief of Staff to General Gerd von Rundstedt. Manstein devised a groundbreaking military operation called the Sichelschnitt, or the Sickle Cut. Its strategy involved cutting through the dense Ardennes forest, utilizing rapid armored thrusts to surprise the enemy, and exploiting weaknesses in their defenses. This strategy was successful. It cut off French and Allied armies in Belgium. The Belgian army was overwhelmed. May 28th, Belgium surrendered. The Blitzkrieg became impossible. Now, France, the heart of Europe. The Germans struck with ferocity. The Maginot Line, France's mighty defense, was bypassed. Heinz Guderian's armored units swept through the Ardennes, cutting through French lines. They struck at the rear of the Allied forces. The French army was in disarray. The Germans reached the English Channel, cutting off the British Expeditionary Force and French troops. Panic ensued. The Allies were trapped. The situation was dire. After a few failed Allied counterattacks, no alternative remained but to evacuate by sea as many trapped forces as possible. Dunkirk became a desperate evacuation. Between 27th of May and 4th of June, 340,000 men under shell fire and aerial attack were evacuated. But they had lost all their arms and equipment. Many French troops were taken prisoner. It also became impossible for Britain to help France. It was a total disaster for the Allied forces. The Germans had achieved a stunning victory. June 5th. The Battle of France began once again. The German attack was resumed against Paris itself and east of the Maginot Line, heading south toward Lyon. They captured city after city. General Vega, the French military commander in charge, reported that it was impossible to stem the German advance. He advised seeking an armistice. Many within the French government who could sense defeat supported him. On the 10th of June, Italy's Benito Mussolini declared war on France. He was too anxious to preserve the Pact of Steel. He saw that the gains were easy and the price too low. He sent 32 divisions. His forces moved a few miles into France. June 14th, Paris fell. The City of Light went under Nazi control. France was defeated. The Blitzkrieg had triumphed. With fear and doubts mounting, Marshal Pétain signed the armistice agreement. It was dictated by Hitler. It was signed in Foch's railway carriage of 1918, which was specialty brought from a museum to its old site in the forest of Compiègne. France was knocked out of the war. In just 6 weeks, Nazi Germany had conquered the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. The world was stunned. The dark clouds remained. Europe was under Nazi shadow. But the story was far from over. The war now spread out of Europe. The next battleground, Africa. The desert was harsh and relentless. This was the backdrop of the Siege of Tobruk, a battle that tested the limits of endurance and strategy. From the Germans' perspective, it was a tale of initial triumphs and ultimate frustrations. In the late 1940s, the Allies had defeated the Italian 10th Army during Operation Compass. The remaining army was trapped at Betapham. Adolf Hitler felt compelled to send reinforcements to rescue his beleaguered Italian ally. For this, he selected one of his finest men, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the master of desert warfare. His reputation preceded him. Known for his daring tactics and swift maneuvers, Rommel led the Africa Corps. His objective? Capture Tobruk. This port was crucial for the Axis supply lines. Rommel's strategy was clear. Strike hard, strike fast. In his words, sweat saves blood, blood saves lives, but brains save both. April 1941. Operation Sonnenblume. Rommel's forces advanced rapidly. They reached Tobruk. The initial assault began on April 10th. German panzers, supported by Italian troops, attacked the Allied defenses. The Luftwaffe bombarded key positions. The Allies were driven back across Libya to the Egyptian border. The Germans made significant gains. It seemed victory was within reach. But the defenders of Tobruk were resilient. The 9th Australian Division, led by General Leslie Morsehead, held their ground. They repelled the initial German assaults. The Allies fortified their positions. The siege had begun. Rommel was not deterred. He adapted his strategy. He decided to encircle Tobruk, cut off its supply lines, starve the Allies into submission. The Germans laid extensive minefields. They fortified their positions. The siege tightened. April 30th, 1941. Rommel launched a second major assault. This time, he committed to the 15th Panzer Division. The attack was fierce. German tanks smashed through the outer defenses. The Luftwaffe provided relentless air support. The defenders were pushed back, but they did not break. The siege continued. The summer of 1941. The siege dragged on. The Germans bombarded Tobruk daily. Artillery shells rained down. The Luftwaffe conducted constant air raids. The defenders endured. Supplies dwindled. Conditions worsened. But morale remained high. The Australians, known as the Rats of Tobruk, were determined to hold on. October 1941. The British launched Operation Crusader, a massive counteroffensive aimed at relieving Tobruk. Rommel was caught by surprise. The Allies attacked from multiple directions. The German lines were stretched thin. Rommel fought desperately to hold his position. November 1941. The Allies broke through. The siege was lifted. Rommel ordered them to retreat. The Afrika Korps pulled back. Hitler turned toward the east again. June 22, 1941. The coming of a new chapter in World War II. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, a gamble by Adolf Hitler. With France defeated and only Britain left standing, Hitler turned towards his next goal, Germany's expansion into the Eastern Front, aimed at the heart of the Soviet Union. Hitler's motives seem to have been mixed. He feared that the Russians might attack Germany while his forces were still occupied in the West. More importantly, he hated communism and wished for Lebensraum, a living space that would ensure the dominance of the German people. This required the defeat of the Soviet Union and the colonization of its territories, especially the resource-rich Ukraine. Hitler considered Aryan Germans superior to Slavics. It was a war of superior versus inferior, the Aryans versus non-Aryans, Nazism versus Stalinism. According to historian Alan Bullock, Hitler invaded Russia for the simple and sufficient reason that he had always meant to establish the foundations of his thousand-year Reich by the annexation of the territory lying between the Vistula and the Urals. Hugh Trevor Roper suggests, to Hitler, the Russian campaign was not a luxury. It was the be-all and end-all of Nazism. It could not be delayed. It was now or never. Hitler did not expect a long war. Talking to the Oberkommando des Heeres, OKH, Army High Command, which ran the war on the Eastern Front, he said, "We only have to kick in the door, and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." 5.5 million German soldiers, 3,500 tanks, 5,000 aircraft, 47,000 pieces of artillery. The Wehrmacht was led by the most brilliant generals of the time, Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Lieb and Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, General Heinz Guderian, General Erich von Manstein. Hitler believed in a swift victory. He saw the Soviet Union as a colossus with feet of clay. The plan was simple, a three-pronged attack. Army Group North, led by Wilhelm Ritter von Lieb, would strike towards Leningrad. Army Group Center, under Fedor von Bock, would dive towards Moscow. Army Group South, commanded by Gerd von Rundstedt, would head for Kiev. Heinz Guderian would head the Panzer Army. At 3:15 a.m., the invasion began. It was blitzkrieg on an awesome scale. The German war machine roared to life. Havoc was struck. The Soviet defenses were unprepared. Disorder and confusion erupted. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies. Soviet airfields were bombed. Communication lines were cut. Panic spread. General Heinz Guderian, master of armored warfare, led his panzers through the Soviet lines. His tanks moved with unprecedented speed. Towns and cities fell one by one, as if a string of beads were pulled apart and the beads fell on the ground, each following the other. The Red Army was in disarray. Stalin was stunned. The ground beneath his feet shook. Cold sweat streamed down his pale skin. His generals scrambled to mount a defense. By July, the army group center had advanced over 300 miles. Smolensk fell. The road to Moscow seemed open. The Russians were still re-equipping their army and air force. Thanks to Stalin's purges, many of their generals were inexperienced. But the tables slowly turned on the Germans. It was nature, not the Red Army. The weather turned against them. Heavy rains of October slowed their advance. They filled Russian roads with mud. Russian winter set in. The temperatures dropped to minus 38 degrees Celsius. The German army had inadequate clothing since they had expected a quick victory. Despite the challenges, the Nazi army continued moving forward. In the south, Gerhard von Rundstedt's forces encircled Kiev, a massive victory. Over 600,000 Soviet troops were captured. The Germans celebrated. It seemed nothing could stop them. They had become invincible. But the Soviet Union was vast. The winter was harsh. The Germans were unprepared for the freezing temperatures. Their advance stalled. Supplies ran low. Morale dropped. Yet, the initial months of Operation Barbarossa were a triumph for Nazi Germany. They captured vast territories and inflicted heavy casualties on the Red Army. The world watched in awe and fear. Generals like Erich von Manstein and Heinz Guderian became legends. Their tactics studied and admired. The Blitzkrieg had shown its power, but the cost was high, and the ultimate victory remained elusive. Back to North Africa. In the blistering sands of Libya, amidst the Western Desert Campaign, a pivotal clash unfolded, the Battle of Gazala. Here, General Erwin Rommel, leading the Heer, would face off against the British Eighth Army. In early 1941, Rommel pushed east across Libya. The Allies responded by constructing a fortified line at Gazala, extending south from the Mediterranean coast. On May 26th, Rommel struck, aiming to flank the position and trap the Allies near the coast. Rommel devised a daring plan, a sweeping flank attack around Bir Hakeim. The Italian 132nd Armored Division Ariete would assault Bir Hakeim, while the 21st and 15th Panzer Divisions swung around the Allied flank. The 90th Light Africa Division Battle Group would block reinforcements from joining the battle at El Adem. Trapped by Bir Hakeim to the south, Tobruk to the north, and the original Allied minefields to the west, Rommel faced constant attack. His supply situation grew dire. On May 29th, supply trucks breached the minefields, reinvigorating his forces. Rommel attacked the west, splitting the Allied front. General Sir Claude Auchinleck, over-optimistic, headed the British forces and pushed for a counterattack along the coast. But his comrade, Major General Neil Ritchie, focusing on Tobruk and El Adem, resisted. Rommel attacked east and north, overrunning British divisions. The cauldron strengthened, and Bir Hakeim suffered. By June 10th, Allied defenses shattered. Ritchie ordered an evacuation. Rommel's forces dealt severe blows around El Adem. Tobruk fell swiftly. The cost? 98,000 Allied casualties and 540 tanks. Rommel's victory earned him a Field Marshal promotion from Hitler. June 1942. The First Battle of El Alamein. Rommel was a man of steel. He redirected his men, this time to seize the Suez Canal to cut off British supply lines. Rommel's forces pushed deep into Egypt. They reached the city of El Alamein just 150 miles from Cairo. The British were on the defensive. Rommel saw an opportunity. He launched an attack on June 1st. The initial assault was destructive. German panzers smashed through British lines. The Luftwaffe supported from the skies. It seemed like another victory was within reach. But the British, under General Claude Auchinleck, fought back. They counterattacked on July 2nd. The battle turned into a brutal war of attrition. Both sides suffered heavy losses. By mid-July, Rommel's advance had stalled. The first battle ended in a stalemate. The British had stopped the German drive to overrun Egypt. By October 1942, the Second Battle of El Alamein, the stage was set for a decisive clash. The British had a new commander, General Bernard Montgomery. He was determined to turn the tide. Rommel, aware of the impending attack, prepared his defenses. He laid extensive minefields and fortified positions. The Germans were ready. October 23, 1942. The night was still. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The attack began. The British launched a massive artillery barrage. The ground shook. The sky lit up. Rommel's men braced themselves. The second battle had begun. Despite the ferocity of the British assault, the Germans held their ground. Rommel's defensive strategy was working. The minefields and anti-tank guns took a heavy toll on the British armor. The German lines held firm. For a moment, it seemed like Rommel might pull off another miracle. But Montgomery was relentless. He kept up the pressure of the British infantry. The Australian and New Zealand divisions also made progress. They opened corridors through the Axis defenses. The German lines began to buckle. Rommel knew he was in trouble. Rommel fought desperately to hold his position. He directed his troops with wild energy. The Desert Fox was everywhere, inspiring his men. However, the British had overwhelming material superiority. They had more tanks, more artillery, and more men. The German forces were outmatched. November 2nd. Rommel signaled to Hitler. The battle was lost. The German lines were breaking. The British were advancing. Rommel ordered a retreat. The Afrika Korps began to pull back. The Second Battle of El Alamein was over. From the Germans' perspective, it was a story of initial successes and ultimate defeat. The Desert Fox had met his match. The sand of El Alamein would forever be a testament to the fierce struggle and the dramatic twists of war. The Eastern Front was a frozen hell. But Hitler and his men's obsession with the Soviet Union was still not over. The German Wehrmacht launched a series of audacious offensives on the Soviet Union. This time, the target was Leningrad and Stalingrad. In the summer of 1941, Operation Barbarossa was in full swing. The German Army Group North, led by Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Lieb, advanced toward Leningrad. The city, a symbol of Soviet strength, was a prime target. The Germans aimed to encircle and starve it into submission. By September, the siege began. German artillery and Luftwaffe bombers pounded the city. The Finnish army, allied with the Germans, blocked escaped routes from the north. The noose tightened. Supplies dwindled. The people of Leningrad faced a harsh winter with little food or fuel. Von Lieb's strategy was clear: isolate Leningrad, cut off all supply lines, bombard the city into submission. He believed that a prolonged siege would break the Soviets' will to fight. The Germans established a blockade, preventing any aid from reaching the beleaguered city. Inside Leningrad, the situation was dreadful. Citizens resorted to eating anything they could find: pets, leather, and even wallpaper paste. The Soviet Red Army, under General Georgy Zhukov, fought valiantly. They repelled German attacks, but the cost was high. The city was on the brink of collapse. In January 1943, the Soviet Red Army launched Operation Iskra, a daring offensive to break the siege. After fierce fighting, they succeeded. A narrow land corridor was opened, allowing supplies to reach the starving city. The siege was not fully lifted until January 1944, but the worst was over. While Leningrad endured its siege, another epic battle unfolded in the south. Stalingrad, a vital industrial city on the Volga River, became the next target. Hitler believed that capturing Stalingrad would cripple Soviet morale and secure the oil field in the Caucasus. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus led the German Sixth Army, his eyes fixed on Stalingrad. Operation Blue, the German summer offensive of 1942, aimed to seize the city and push further into Soviet territory. The initial advance was swift. German forces reached the outskirts of Stalingrad by late August. 14th September, 1942. The Germans launch a massive assault on Stalingrad. The 51st Army Corps, led by General Walter von Seydlitz-Kurzbach, attacked the city's northern sector. The 71st Infantry Division targeted the central rail station. The 48th Panzer Corps, under General Ferdinand Heim, struck from the south. Stalingrad turned into a brutal urban battlefield, house-to-house fighting, snipers lurking in every corner. The Germans advanced, but the Soviets, under General Vasily Ivanovich Chuikov, fought tenaciously. By mid-October, the Germans controlled most of Stalingrad. They reached the Volga River, intercepting the Soviet supply lines. Victory seemed within grasp, but the Soviets had other plans. They prepared a massive counter-offensive. 19th of November, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a pincer movement aimed at encircling the German 6th Army. General Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Walewski masterminded the plan. Soviet forces attacked from the north and south, trapping the Germans in a deadly pocket. The Germans' 6th Army was surrounded. Supplies ran out. Winter set in. Paulus requested permission to break out, but Hitler refused. He ordered the 6th Army to hold its ground. The Luftwaffe, under General Wolfram von Richthofen, attempted to airlift supplies, a desperate but calculated attempt at reviving hopes of victory. But this time, nature was on the other side. Inside the encirclement, conditions were horrific. Soldiers froze and starved. Disease spread. The Soviets tightened their grip. The Germans launched desperate counterattacks, but they were repelled. The situation was hopeless. Alas, on January 31, 1943, Paulus, now promoted to Field Marshal, surrendered. The Eastern Front seethed with tension. The Soviet juggernaut, bloodied but unyielding, faced off against the German war machine. Amidst this maelstrom stood Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. A strategist, a tactician, and a master of armored warfare, he led the southern assault. He was the same person who had devised the sickle cut for attack on Belgium and France. He was perhaps one of the most talented German field commanders in World War II. Von Stein, the key to victory lay not in brute force alone, but in finesse, the unexpected move, the audacious gambit. Manstein's doctrine was simple yet revolutionary. Bypass the enemy's strength. Strike at the weakness. His eyes turned toward Kursk, a Soviet bulge ripe for encirclement. Operation Citadel, his last throw of the dice. He instructed his men to strike Kursk salient, cutting it like a sickle through wheat. His men amassed tanks and guns. Manstein's plan, a pincer movement. North and south, they would converge on Kursk, trapping the Red Army and breaking their spine. The cauldron boiled. The earth trembled as the tanks roared. Manstein's panzers surged, but the Soviet defenses held. The Kartashuka-Prokhorovka road became a graveyard of steel. Manstein thought that victory was close, damn close. He attacked again. Kharkiv fell, but Kursk loomed. The Soviets rallied, their tanks like iron beasts. Kursk bled. Manstein's gamble paid. A German victory. The air had fought valiantly on the ground, but now the Luftwaffe and its generals would take center stage. The Treaty of Versailles had imposed disarmament on Germany. This evoked, in the words of one author, a cry of rage through German aviation circles. Included among such circles was Hermann Göring. In his diary, Göring had promised to restore German aviation to the world. Cloaked in a swagger and star power, Göring was no ordinary pilot. He had once been the commander of Richthofen's legendary flying circus fighter wing. Hitler shared Göring's vision. They both longed for Germany's pre-war greatness. In January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor, while Göring was appointed Reich Commissioner of Aviation. Assuming power, Göring exclaimed that he realized the treasures that had fallen into his lap. Göring ignored the Versailles Treaty and covertly began the Luftwaffe's rearmament. So much so that on the 21st of May 1935, the Luftwaffe was officially established as a branch of the German Wehrmacht armed forces, alongside the Heer, Army, and Kriegsmarine, Navy, all in direct contravention of the terms that had been set out at Versailles. During World War II, Hermann Göring spearheaded the Luftwaffe as its commander-in-chief. He burned with a singular ambition to restore German aviation to its former glory. Göring boasted, "No enemy bomber can reach the Ruhr." As Europe trembled when the German war machine awakened in World War II, the Luftwaffe, with its sleek measurements and thundering Stukas, became the vanguard of terror. Their mission to dominate the skies and pave the way for ground forces. When the Heer invaded Poland, the Luftwaffe couldn't wait to show its power. Albert Kesselring, commander of Luftwaffe 1, orchestrated the invasion of Poland. Dive bombers struck first, obliterating the undefended town of Valen. They established superiority swiftly. The skies belonged. Another general, Adolf Galland, the embodiment of Luftwaffe valor, also led the Western theater of war. His slicked-back hair, broken nose, and perpetual cigar make him an icon. Galland's Messerschmitt Bf-109s, adorned with a cheeky Mickey Mouse emblem, danced through the skies. He commanded respect, fear, and awe. From Poland, the Luftwaffe's wings carried them to Norway, Denmark, the Low Countries, and finally France. Their coordination with highly mobilized armored divisions was essential for the quick war Hitler desired. By June 1940, as the Allied forces retreated from Dunkirk, the Luftwaffe stood in awe at its accomplishments. One Luftwaffe anti-aircraft gunner wrote, "I am proud today that I was able to take part in the greatest battle the world has ever seen." Filled with confidence, the Nazi leadership turned its attention to Britain. On July 16th, the Wehrmacht embarked on Operation Sea Lion. The Luftwaffe's fighter pilots and bomber crews launched a relentless aerial campaign, targeting Allied shipping, British ports, airfields, radar installations, and aircraft factories. Despite their efforts, air superiority remained elusive. As the Blitzkrieg unfolded from September 1940 to May 1941, the Luftwaffe shifted tactics, bombing British cities. Yet Britain's resilience held, and Operation Sea Lion remained unavailable. Disappointed, Hitler redirected his focus. The Luftwaffe committed to the North African theater, engaging in fierce battles over Libya, Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia. Over the Balkans, the Luftwaffe's performance was both stunning and demanding. In April 1941, after Italy invaded Greece, the Axis Air Force soared over the rugged terrain. The Luftwaffe's generals made it the most formidable air force the world had ever seen. Yet beneath the victory lay gaps, manpower shortages, communication woes, and radar blind spots. Goering's bravado masked vulnerability. General Field Marshal Robert Ritter von Greim took the helm in the war's twilight. The Luftwaffe's fate hung in the balance. Desperation gripped the once mighty force. Heroes fought on, but the dream of victory faded. The roar of engines became a requiem. The German men who controlled the seas were no less than those who thumped on the ground or dominated the skies. The dark, vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, a theater of war, the stage for Germany's naval prowess. The Kriegsmarine, Germany's navy, was a formidable force. Its finest admirals orchestrated their deadly fights. Their success in sea battles was marked by cunning strategies and relentless tactics. 1939. The Battle of the Atlantic begins. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood on the bridge of his U-boat, eyes fixed on the horizon. His vessel, sleek as a hunting shark, prowled the black depths. The sea whispered secrets, the creak of holes, the haunting of distant propellers. His mission was to cut off Allied supply lines. Admiral Karl Dönitz, the mastermind behind the U-boat strategy, commanded with precision. During World War I, Karl Dönitz was a young submarine officer. He used to patrol the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. His U-boats would glide silently beneath the waves, a shadow in the vast expanse. After the war, despite the Treaty of Versailles banning German submarine construction, Dönitz oversaw the birth of a clandestine U-boat fleet. His ambitions knew no bounds. In 1936, Dönitz ascended to command. His U-boat became a force to be reckoned with, striking fear into Allied hearts. During World War II, he commanded the Battle of the Atlantic. His tactic? The Wolf Pack. Groups of U-boats attacked convoys under the cover of darkness. They played a deadly game, a battle of shadows. They surfaced like phantoms, their precision rising like curious serpents. They wreaked havoc. Their torpedoes found their marks, crippling the Allies' convoys. Ships sank, supplies were lost. The U-boats strike fear into the hearts of sailors. The U-boats continued their reign of terror. Admiral Dönitz refined his tactics. The wolf packs grew larger. Coordination improved. The U-boats attacked in waves. Convoys were decimated. The Allies adapted. They developed new technologies, sonar, depth charges. The tide began to turn. But the U-boats remained a constant threat. Their stealth and speed were unmatched. The Battle of the Atlantic raged on. Hitler was the first Nazi dictator, but he was not the last. It was Admiral Karl Dönitz to whom this ignominious distinction belongs. As the Nazi regime teetered on the brink of collapse, Hitler made a critical decision. He appointed Dönitz as the head of the military and civil command. In his final political testament, Hitler revealed his successor. Dönitz was named President of the Reich, Minister of War, and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. May 1941. The North Atlantic was cold and unforgiving. The German battleship Bismarck, under the command of Admiral Günther Lutyens, set sail. Its mission? To disrupt Allied shipping. The British Royal Navy intercepted it. The battle was fierce. The Bismarck's guns roared. The British battle cruiser HMS Hood was hit. It exploded. Only 3 survivors. The Bismarck was victorious, but its impact was felt across the Atlantic. The Mediterranean Sea, a crucial battleground. German and Italian forces joined hands. Admiral Erich Raeder, the head of the Kriegsmarine, oversaw operations. The strategy: control the sea routes. The target: Malta. The island was a thorn in the Axis side. Supplies to North Africa were at stake. The Luftwaffe bombed Malta relentlessly. German U-boats and surface ships blockaded the island. The Allies struggled to maintain their supply lines. The Axis gained the upper hand. December 1942. The Arctic waters were icy and treacherous. Convoy JW-51B sailed towards the Soviet Union. The German Navy, led by Admiral Oskar Kumitz, prepared to strike. The plan? A pincer movement. Heavy cruisers and destroyers attacked from both sides. The convoy was caught in a deadly trap. The British escorts fought back. The battle was intense. Shells exploded. Ships were damaged. The Germans withdrew, but the convoy was heavily hit. The Kriegsmarine tactics were ruthless. December 1943. The Arctic's darkness was pierced by the glow of battle. The German battleship Scharnhorst, commanded by Rear Admiral Erich Bay, set out to intercept an Allied convoy. The British Home Fleet, led by Admiral Bruce Fraser, lay in wait. The Scharnhorst was fast, but the British were prepared. Radar guided their ships. The battle was brutal. The Scharnhorst was hit repeatedly. It tried to escape, but the British closed in. Torpedoes struck. The Scharnhorst sank. The Kriegsmarine breathed its last. It suffered a significant loss. Back to the ground warfare. Early 1945. The Soviet Red Army, relentless and battle-hardened, advanced from the Vistula River toward Berlin. The challenge in front of Germany was to halt the Soviet tide and buy precious time for the city's survival. Gotthard Henrici, a seasoned general, is renowned for his defensive prowess. He understood that Berlin's salvation lay in resilience, cunning, and calculated sacrifices. He immediately reorganized the remnants of Heer into Army Group Vistula, a makeshift force to stem the Soviet onslaught. Henrici chose the Zilo Heights as the first line of defense. These elevated ridges offered a natural barrier. His orders were clear: hold at all costs. Henrici knew he couldn't defeat the Soviets outright. Instead, he aimed to bleed them, inflict casualties, slow their advance, and sap their momentum. He positioned reserves, strategically ready to reinforce critical sectors. His motto: trade space for time. As the Red Army closed in, Henrici prepared for brutal street-to-street combat within Berlin itself. Every building, every ally would become a fortress. Soviet forces massed, but Henrici's defenses held firm. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 3rd Panzer Army guarded the lower order, while General Theodor Busse's 9th Army blocked the direct route to Berlin along the middle order. Henrici's troops fought doggedly, paying a heavy price. The Zilo Heights became a graveyard for both sides. When the situation grew untenable, Henrici ordered a strategic retreat, pulling back to the heart of Berlin. As the Soviets closed in, Berlin's fate hung in the balance. Henrici's men fought fiercely, street by street, house by house. Despite Henrici's efforts, Berlin succumbed to the Soviet onslaught. The city's fall marked the end of World War II. As we draw the curtain on this tale of iron and fire, remember this: Napoleon stood alone, a solitary titan. But Hitler, he was nothing without his generals. These men, like chess masters, moved their pieces across the board of Europe, altering the course of history with every calculated step. Each general, a cog in the war machine, played a pivotal role. They were the architects of chaos, the harbingers of change. Their decisions, their victories, and their defeats shaped the world we live in today. The battles they fought, the strategies they devised, and the lives they impacted are etched into the fabric of history. Consider the Battle of France, where Guderian's blitzkrieg tactics shattered the French defenses in a matter of weeks. In North Africa, Rommel's Africa Corps clashed with the British Eighth Army in a series of brutal engagements. His ability to inspire his troops and outmaneuver his enemies earned him the respect of both friend and foe. On the Eastern Front, Manstein's counteroffensive at Kharkiv turned the tide against the Soviet forces. In the end, it was not just Hitler's ambition that carved a scar across the 20th century. It was the brilliance and brutality of his generals. They were the storm that swept across Europe, leaving a legacy of both awe and horror. Their actions, driven by a combination of loyalty, ambition, and a relentless pursuit of victory, left an indelible mark on history. So as we close this video, ponder this: how different this history would be if these men had chosen another path. The world, forever changed by their hands, stands as a testament to their power and their peril. The echoes of their deeds still resonate today, a haunting reminder of the thin line between genius and madness. If you're fascinated by the strategic brilliance of Germany's World War II generals, don't miss out. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more interesting historical narratives. Share your insights in the comments below and tell us which legendary battle or military leader you'd like us to explore next.